And now we'll do the final lecture on federalism, and we'll be done with this. And we left off talking about No Child Left Behind. And now I want to talk about, so as you see, even though educational policy is entirely in the responsibility of the state government, the federal government is able to go ahead and the federal government was able to go ahead and get state governments to follow No Child Left Behind and to do what they want, what the federal government wanted, because basically the federal government said, you know, if you go ahead and you do this, we'll give you money, and if you don't, we won't give you money. That's actually the same thing that happened when it comes to the legal drinking age. State governments are the ones who determine the legal drinking age in their state. Every state has that responsibility. But the federal government goes ahead and provides funding to pay for roads and bridges and all that kind of stuff every year. So the federal government always gives some money to the states to help pay for their transportation needs. So the federal government, when it decided that it wanted to go ahead and have the drinking age raised to 21, used to be 18, they said to the states, look, you're clearly in charge of setting the drinking age. And so we can't tell you what to do. But if you don't raise the drinking age to 21, we're not going to give you money for transportation. If you do raise the drinking age to 21, then we'll go ahead and we'll give you money for transportation. And so what did the states do? The states volunteered to go ahead and adopt the federal standards. That's how the federal government gets things done. Some people call that bribery, extortion, whatever you want to call it. That's how the federal government gets the states to do the things that it wants to do. So federalism is this like sort of negotiation between the states and the federal government that goes on all the time. States trying to assert their independence, the federal government trying to assert its independence. So those are just some examples. Now the last part of this federalism discussion I want to talk about is something more conceptual, or I guess it's sort of two different ways that the federal government gives money to the states. The federal government can give money to the states in basically two different forms. One form is called categorical grants. The other form is called block grants. So this is just money that's given from the federal government to the states and how it's given to the states, because it affects how the states can spend the money. So for example, one thing the federal government does sometimes is they give categorical grants. A categorical grant is money that's given to the state for a specific purpose. Like, for example, the federal government might go ahead and say, here's money, and it's specifically for building more classrooms. Or here's money to go ahead and provide internet access to your students. Or here's money to go ahead and hire new teachers. Each one of those examples was all something that had to do with education, but the federal government said this is what it must be spent on. That's called a categorical grant. So for example, money for transportation, the federal government might say, here's money and it's just for building, upgrading bridges, or it's just for going ahead and repaving roads. That's a categorical grant. A block grant is different. A block grant is money that's given for a general purpose. So for example, thinking about the other example of categorical grants, what the government might say, here's some money and it's for education. And so one state may go ahead and say, yeah, well, we need more teachers. And another state may say, yeah, we need internet access. And another state may say, we need more buildings. That way, in a block grant, the state gets to decide how the money is going to be spent. Usually it's the governor who decides. They'll decide how the money is going to be spent because they're the person in charge of the state. So it's money for a general purpose. So for example, the same thing I gave the example of bridges and paving roads. In a block grant, the federal government might go ahead and say, here's money for transportation. And they let the state decide how that money is going to be spent. They can spend it on anything they want. So the key here is these are two different ways that the federal government can go ahead and influence the states by basically dangling money in front of them and setting certain restrictions on what they can spend the money on. Categorical grants for a specific purpose. Block grants for a more general purpose. And that concludes our lecture on federalism.